Well, hello everyone. This is Marianela Medrano from Palabra Counseling and Training Center in Connecticut. We have various locations in Stamford, New Haven, and Middlebury. And we had, in face of the circumstances, the two pandemics that had attacked us more fiercely in the last few months, I decided to start these conversations with wellness professionals, with colleagues who are invested and who are activists in their community. Last week, I spoke with two colleagues, one from New York, one from Connecticut, Na Opoku and Julie Collazo from New York. And today I have two colleagues. One is in Florida right now, but he's actually a migrant. He has many homes. And then the other one is here with me in Connecticut. So the first person I'm going to introduce here is Dr. Bob, and he is the stress relief doctor. He's an executive stress management wellness coach, among many other things. Dr. Bob Wright is a graduate of the California Institute of Integral Studies, doctoral program in transformative studies. And it's one of, actually, Dr. Bob, that's one of the places that the educational institutions that I have the most respect, aside from my alma mater. Dr. Bob has done extensive research on grief impact on health. One of his studies in particular breaks new grounds, since his finding demonstrates that the same physiological mechanisms needed to induce relaxation also help us dissolve pain and grief. And that's an important thing. I hope he will be addressing that today with us. He is a certified open focus trainer, a certified practitioner of Ericksonian hypnosis, and a certified practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, and a certified seminar leader, and an avid traveler, avid reader, avid everything. He is someone who...
Oh my, you wait, I'm flattered, but thank you, Mary.
He has a lot of curiosity. And then my other guest is Yannick Grant from the Courage to Be practice here in Connecticut. And I prefer to call her Nikki. And she describes herself as a fun, loving person who enjoys to laugh and who is empathic. She is a licensed clinical social worker and has worked in the field of mental health and substance abuse since 2009, doing direct care in outpatient settings and nonprofit organizations. And I think that she has been doing since 2015. This includes individual therapy, couples therapy, group therapy, and also intensive outpatient treatments. She has worked with both children and adults. She has experience working with families and individuals from culturally diverse backgrounds, and prides herself on being able to identify with them at various levels. And that is key to doing the wellness work that we are meant to be doing out there. Nikki specializes in mood, trauma, and co-occurring disorders and couples therapy. She looks at the person as a whole to better assist with piecing together the various aspects of a person's life. Through the use of evidence-based therapeutic interventions, she aspires to assist in uncovering individuals' full potential by helping them heal, cope, and understand themselves better. And the healing, the cope, and the understanding ourselves better is key. And I hope we are going to be deepening into those issues through the conversation. So thank you so much for joining me in this conversation today.
You're very welcome.
I have a first question, and it's around this idea of us having been dreaming for the longest time with a post-racial America, and I will say a post-racial world. I come from a country where racial injustices are something that has really impacted our growth and our evolution as humans. And then I came to the United States to get the same thing at a bigger scale. So the idea of a post-racial world is an important one. However, we continue to be bombarded by affronts, by abuses, by new events. I was talking before about two pandemics. The first one is the health pandemic through COVID-19, but then the other one is an older one, which is the racial pandemic and the racism pandemic. And we have seen how the two of them go hand in hand. So my question is, that was a long Dominican way to say something. Since we know that the post-racial America is really not possible yet, and that we continue to be assaulted by new affronts, and that creates trauma and despair, and specifically among Blacks and people of color. And we know that has a repercussion in the mental health of people, because we know what the impact of trauma. So what are you seeing? My specific question is, what are you seeing in your interactions, in your practices, in terms of the repercussion that racial and racism and racial injustice is having on people?
I'll let Nikki take that first.
I was just going to say, Bob, did you want to start? But okay, so I can definitely say that what I've been seeing most is this deep-rooted sense of self-doubt that comes with the racial trauma that's affecting us right now. And that's because it kind of leads to this narrative that we've been given from the world, right? And I always use the term BIPOC, so, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So amongst that group, it's this idea of inferiority and being less than. So when you're constantly fed that narrative, whether it's through social media, whether it's through microaggressions, whether it's just through, the discrimination, or even just hate in general, right? You literally internalize that to be, I'm not good enough, right? There's something wrong with me. So what I've been challenged with in my work is getting to this mindset work of, okay, how do we take back that narrative, change it to a strength-based narrative, and then put that forth within the world? And I actually, so I can speak in terms of my practice, that I do this on two different levels. I do it with my BIPOC community, where we're doing the mindset work of reclaiming their narrative and changing it. But then with my Caucasian community, what I do through trainings as well is work with them to not only be culturally competent, but work with them to have an anti-racist language and mindset as well. So it has to be tackled from both sides in order for the narrative to change. Otherwise, it's two things just continuously clashing. But it's being fed. It's literally that, this underlying narrative that's being fed in so many ways that it makes it hard to step out from it and say, wait a second, I can change this. Like, I can actually be something different than what the world continues to tell me that I am.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I want to hear what Bob has to say, but you know, eventually I want to circle back to this internalized sense of deficit,
Yep.
which I also see in my practice and worries me a lot. And I'm, you know, big on working with narrative and kind of analyzing, not analyzing, but recognizing the lines and what is said underlines about ourselves and about the collective where we belong. So definitely I want to come back to that, Nikki. Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Marianella, and excellent, Nikki, listening to you. You know, my situation is a little bit different, and I want to answer your question in a way that probably will be very unexpected for you. As you're aware, you know, my beloved wife, Christine, passed away in the summer of 2018. And the things that led up to that, you know, she was in 9 hospitals in 16 months between Florida and New York, if you could imagine what that was like, and eventually passing away of cancer. And so the reason I mention that is that the type of grieving that people are doing now with the pandemic and the lockdown, where, you know, people can't even have funerals, or they don't even know if the ashes they're being given from the crematorium are those of their close loved one. Mm-hmm. Or, so for example, I have some Jewish friends, they apparently, in their tradition, they have to bury people right away. And with the lockdown, people can't cross borders, et cetera. You know, if you come across someplace, you know, for example, I just heard the governor of New York is considering anyone coming back from Florida, you know, have to do a 14-day quarantine. So I'm in that category where I'm in Florida, but I'm a New Yorker thinking about coming back. And so here's the thing. Okay, my situation is basically in the last 2 years, I haven't been working with clients. However, I have been very fortunate in the sense that, like what George Soros says, you know, the big trading guy, he said, in order to come up with a big idea, you need leisure time. And so I've been working on big ideas by telescoping out, and this, in fact, this pandemic is actually a writer's dream. You know, people that write, they look for solitude, and you know, my Myers-Briggs type is such that I'm a very high introvert and I'm a very high T. So this suits me very well, and so my point is this. During this time, I've had tremendous opportunity to reflect over the last 2 years, to telescope out. And in fact, right at this moment, I'm supposed to be on the beach in the Cook Islands in the South Pacific, but here I am in Florida. So I've had an opportunity to talk to other professionals and ask them, you know, the kind of question that you're asking. What are you thinking? You know, what is the Wizard of Oz moment? Because we as a society on planet Earth, we are at a tipping point. So this is much bigger than therapy or pandemic. And so I just want to say this. You know, people use the word racism. And so I don't know if that is a misnomer or not, but I think when you telescope out to the planetary level, what we're looking at historically is we're looking at a system, a global system of white supremacy, of white privilege, and all the byproducts of that. And so it's at the institutional level, it's at a structural level, it's all educational systems, it's all economic systems. And notice that with this pandemic, that the more melanin that you have in your skin, the higher level of mortality and comorbidity issues that arise. And so it's actually been quite shocking. I know they had published in New York, when this thing first happened in March, they posted up a list of 30 police officers in New York City that had died of COVID-19. And of the 30, 25 were Black.
Mm.
So that is really what we're talking about. This is a global trauma event. And so this is way past any kind of psychotherapy or anything like that. However, just like the Chinese character for crisis, it has two parts. It has crisis and it has opportunity. Because you asked the question about a post-racial world, and then, you know, the larger issue is that is that even a possibility unless we address these other underlying things? It's like we've got an underlying thing that's multidimensional and it's global. And so it's not just in the Dominican Republic. And so I just want to, you know, end this little piece by saying, you know, it's not just about the Black Lives Matter, and it's not just about the police. The police are actually the tip of the iceberg because the police do whatever they're told, okay? Because a fish thinks from the head. So you know, I'm saying, I looked at a report in April, and it was a political risk report for the insurance industry. And what they had done was look at the social unrest and political unrest and rioting around the world. And in 2019, what they found was that there were riots, social upheavals, etc., in 43 countries in 2019. So this thing of people being oppressed, which is basically what we're talking about, you know, the racism is just one form of oppression. But as we see with the lockdown, the real oppression, the most violent thing that you can do to a person is to cut off their money, right?
Yes.
You cut off their money, you actually choking off their air supply. So I know this was a long-winded way of attempt to answer your question, but because I'm from, I did the doctoral program at CIS, I think you understand that their approach, like the school that you went to, which is to look at the underlying paradigms of what's going on. And what I like to say is that if you have a three-legged stool, and if you knock off one leg, the stool automatically collapses. So that's where we are. Our society is on the verge of collapse. A Yale economist last week, he said the US dollar in the nearby future is going to collapse by 35%. We have other people saying that compared to the 2008 financial crisis, that you know, the entire global financial system is on the verge of collapse. And so here's the last piece of evidence that I would give of that. You know, a couple of months ago, you know, for the people that don't understand trading, or they don't trade, you know, in the futures market, they're trading oil futures, you know, oil for physical delivery. Oil went down in one day, -47. So here's what we're talking about. Most people could understand, you have, let's say you have an oil tank at your home, and you know you get an oil delivery, 250 gallons, 300 gallons, right? You know, in the wintertime, they're delivering oil. So normally the person delivering the oil would give you a bill, right? So if you got 250 gallons and it was $2 a gallon, then you paying out 500. With oil going -47 for the first time in history, this would be like the oil truck guy pulling up in your house and he says, Marianella and Nikki, I'll pay you $47 a gallon to take the oil off my hands. So think about what we're talking about. This has never happened in the history. They call these black swan events. So that's what I'm saying. So the last 2 years, I haven't been working with clients, but it has given me the opportunity to think about the bigger picture, telescoping out what's really going on. And that includes the racial thing. And I'll just close by saying what we have to do is is understand that the number one way that this system works is a divide and conquer. So I can't tell you how happy I am that we're having this conversation. I'm meeting Nikki for the first time, and then I hope to come up to Connecticut and all the three of us could have lunch and continue this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to circle back. I mean, I can't agree more about what you are saying in terms of the magnitude and the many layers of the post-racial world that we want to see and what gets in the way of that. I couldn't agree more with you. But as I promised, I want to come back to what Nikki was saying, because I think as three individuals who wear very similar skin pigmentations, we have witnessed and lived through racism at different levels in our lives. And we also have continue to hold the space for individuals who struggle with that and with that sense of deficit that gets internalized. And I think it's important, and Bob, I know that you're not working one-on-one right now, but even think of these from a personal stance, and also in the context of your conversations with friends and colleagues. And let's see, you know, one of the things that I'm seeing a lot as a practitioner, and even with myself, is the reaction of anger and despair when I sense and when I feel the macroaggressions that keep attacking us. So going back to that, I know for me at a personal level and the work that I do with other people, everything goes to helping people pay attention to their narrative and how they perceive themselves and how they might at times even shortchange themselves. And that then breeds despair, anger, and all these other things. So can we go back to that, and what do we say to ourselves, and what do we say to people who come to us as friends or as clients, because they don't know where to unpack, where to put all these things.
Right. I actually think that with what you're saying, and funny enough to tie it in, right, with what Bob was talking about with the macro picture of things, right? I always say to my colleagues and clients in general that it's hard for you to look at the bigger picture if you're not paying attention to all these smaller parts that play into it. So of course we have, like Bob was talking about, the differences in equity when it comes to housing, education, you know, the public health system, and just the health disparities between people of color and others, right? We have colorism, which is now the internalized piece that you're talking about. But all of that, right, it's getting to the root and saying, okay, how do you help someone develop the mindset to address all this, right? How do you help them to develop the mindset to heal while still being hit with trauma 24/7? And that's the piece of it that's needed, because otherwise, when they decide to address the macro issue, once they get hit with something, they're going to absolutely become discouraged because they don't feel that they can achieve it. So we need to do the mindset work of, okay, you need to be able to get yourself to believe that you can achieve these things, so that when you step out, even if something negative does occur, you're still within that, you know, steady foundation of, okay, I'm going to push through this because this is the next step. This is the next step. And that then leads to what Bob was talking about with all the different levels and the layers of this onion that we're talking about that leads into it. And I think that that's the work that really needs to be done with a lot of our clients, as well as our colleagues and just people we encounter. We need to change the way that we view these things first off before we're able to even do any action work.
Right, and understand, you know, I can say that you know, I was raised in the Dominican Republic and completed part of my education, my education as an adult there, and then came to this country. And I can say that I kind of was raised in a protective cocoon. And when I came to this country for the first time was 1988. And I came to New York, I was visiting families there, and then a good friend of mine who was in New Haven gave me directions on how to take a train and come to New Haven. And I was all excited. I got to Grand Central, and there was this tall white gentleman by the vending machine where the tickets were dispensed. And I tapped him because I didn't know how to purchase the ticket. The person turned to me and said the following: "I don't have any money." So I was perplexed. I didn't know how to respond. I was someone, like I said, I grew up kind of protected and feeling pretty good about myself, and never thought that I could be mistaken by someone who was begging for money. I looked at myself. I happened to like clothing and everything. I was like, "Hi, girl, I'm looking kind of good here. What's happening?"
Yeah.
And there was a mixture of anger and also humor, like, or not so much humor, but like, oh my God, poor man. Like his mind was so, but why did that happen to me? Perhaps, and I think this goes back to what you were saying, Nikki, that when we are built up from the bottom up, it's very difficult to be knocked down. But if you haven't had that, and I think a lot of our clients are coming from those places where they haven't been built up. So that internalized sense of themselves as in deficit kicks up a little bit, immediately. So I know for me that I had everything. I was raised to love myself and to feel myself important and all that, but there was a moment of doubt there. So that's, that's the part that I want us to kind of zero in within the complexity of the multi-layers that we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. I love what Nikki has said and what you have said, Marianella. Basically what we were talking about is roots. So, for example, I saw a really good visual. It showed, the Confederate statues being pulled down, which is great. But underneath the ground, they showed all these roots, right? Which the roots are what need to be dug up. That is what we're talking about. And so, essentially what has happened, especially since 2015, is basically a big fake out. Disinformation, misinformation, misdirection, so that, it's like when you go to see a magician, and the whole reason that a magic trick works is through misdirection. So they'll ask you a question, and while you're focusing over here to the left, and you're looking to the southeast corner, the action's in the northwest corner. So, for example, with the PPP loans, I just saw the news 2 days ago that the Treasury Secretary said that we're not going to release the information on who got the money. Now, as we know, that Magic Johnson had to come out, and because almost no Black business, no matter how successful they were able to successfully negotiate the SBA PPP paperwork. All right. So now, 2 days ago, I see, so the Treasury Secretary says, "Oh, we can't release this information. It's proprietary." Excuse me, this is public taxpayer money, right? So then 24 hours later, I see a story that says, "Oh, by the way, some people in Congress got PPP loans, senators and congressmen." Oh my God. So what we're really talking about is that, while people are focused on Twitter, the wool's being pulled over our eyes, and the bank's being robbed, the taxpayer bank. So I want to say this, and then I'm going to directly answer your question. During the shutdown, the 90 days from March 1st to June 1st, 41% of Black-owned businesses went out of business. Now that's the official rate. So, you know, like they say, when the Black unemployment rate is 15%, it's really 50%. You know, I can take people into neighborhoods where, you know, people are not working and the people are just, it's tough. So, but we know how to survive. So 36% of Latinx businesses went out of business in those 90 days. And 1.8 white-owned businesses went out of business, 1.8 million, right? You know, when I saw that number, I said, oh, that's the pizza shop and Spike Lee Do the Right Thing. You know, he went out of business, right? Because he couldn't open the pizza shop in his own neighborhood. I think that's something that we got to pay attention to. How is it that we allow people to come into our neighborhoods and open business, but we can't go in their neighborhood? And it doesn't matter what group. If a Black person tries to open up in a Korean neighborhood, an Italian neighborhood, the people don't buy from them. But we buy from everybody, right? So that's something to think about. And so I want to end this part of my soliloquy by just saying that in the same period where people were sleeping in their cars, getting evicted on the unemployment line, they're saying during these 90 days, 40 million people filed for unemployment. That doesn't account the people that can't even file for unemployment, you know? And so here's the thing. In the 60 days from March 1st until May 1st, 600 billionaires made their net worth increase $434 billion. It represents the largest transfer of wealth in the history of mankind. You understand what I'm talking about? So while people are worried about, you know, what's going on Facebook, we're being robbed. Okay, so now specifically to your question, because I think this is really goes to the heart of how, because I am, like both of you, solution oriented. Like, give me a solution, because I took some notes before about, you know, I want the focus of my comments to be about 90% about what can we do to resolve and solve some of this, rather than spending 90% on the analysis, because I think we know the analysis is bad. Okay, so specifically, when both of you were talking, the light bulb above my head went immediately to attachment. I remember when my wife Christine and I, we had lunch in Greenwich Village with the then president of NYU, John Sexton, and I said something to him, and he said, "Oh," he says, "I was loved, so I don't have an issue with that." And that speaks directly to what we're talking about in terms of, Marianella, the question you asked: how do we fend off all what I call, from Hamlet, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune? You know, whether it's nobler to rise up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't remember the exact words. It's been too long since I read Hamlet. But that's the issue, that when you are missing the key nurturing, right? The sense of what I call worthiness and deservingness, because you can see it. It creates a level of confidence when a person knows that they're loved, however they get that, whether it's their mother, their father, their aunt, their grandmother, but you can actually feel that energy when a person walks into a room and they have that. And conversely, you can feel that, you know, when they don't. Now, Nikki, you said something that piqued my interest. You said that or Marianella read your bio, said that you're empathic, right? And so I'm also an empath. And so part of the thing that I have to always be careful is that if I read the news or see something on TV, I feel it inside of me. Like when I saw the tsunami in Thailand and the waves came and took all those people out, I had been in Thailand. And I said, oh my gosh, they're the people who ran out to get the fish, not thinking there's an 18-foot wave coming in 2 minutes. right? And so this pandemic, it's like, oh, the horror. It's basically, you know, I personally know several people that have died from the COVID-19. I know people that have been hospitalized. And here I am in Florida unexpectedly, instead of being on the beach in the South Pacific. And I'm surrounded by people who think this SARS-2 coronavirus is a hoax or a joke. Almost nobody down here is wearing a mask, except if you go to a public place that it's required, like in the supermarket, and they won't let you in. Otherwise, so right now, I've been staying inside 99.79% of the time. So the thing is, in terms of with everyday people or ourselves, one of the things that gives you the sustenance to be able to withstand the assault on your consciousness is when you know, it's almost, you know, I don't want to use this verbal Bible verse, but one of my favorite Bible verses is in Ephesians, what is this, is strap on the whole armor of God, where you so you can fend the way the slings and arrows of the wicked one. And so what I'm suggesting is, part of what has to happen is a elevation of consciousness, because one of the things that I see is that the issues that we face with white supremacy and racism and white privilege, it can't be resolved on the physical plane. There has to be a shift in the heart plexus. And so here's a personal example that I will just give that will show this. I have my wife and I are dear friends, and she showed us in Daytona Beach, Florida, where she grew up, and she said my father was a Grand Dragon in the Poobah in the Ku Klux Klan, and she said the only way that you can deal with people like that is they have to die out. So she grew up. Her father was the Ku Klux Klan Grand Dragon, right? So she would know what she's talking about. There is nothing that you could do or say to her daddy that's going to change his mind or his behavior. So we have to look at that. We have to look at the global system and say, hey, who's running this thing, right? It's like when the puppy pulls back the curtain in the Wizard of Oz, remember that moment? And then the guy's there pulling the thing, and he goes, never mind the guy pulling the bells and whistles, you know. So some of what's been happening because of the technology we have today, they cannot control the narrative. The media can't control the narrative the way that they used to. When Walter Cronkite was on TV, Harry Reasoner. And by the way, Nikki, I think you look like, I'm looking at you, I think I've met you before. So that would be very interesting as a synchronicity, that here we would be on this call, and you know, I haven't seen a Marianella in many years, at least 10 years, and would that be something that we've met before?
So I want to thank you so much. I think one of the things that I'm hearing the most here in both the conversations is that for providers, because I know that a great number of our listeners are mental wellness providers. And I think what I hear is that our attention, in order for us to create a space in which people can be held and feel loved and respected, and all the things that need to be offered in order to do away with the maladies that comes with trauma, is love, compassion, and kindness. Those things.
So Mary, I want to cut you off here for a second, because I want to just specifically zero
I think that your thing is, your sound is going in and out. I'm not sure if it's on my end. No, Bob's. I couldn't hear him properly.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, but what I was saying is that what the two of you seem to be indicating is that as providers, as individuals who are activists and who are invested in changing and creating a post-racial and post-abuse and post-every-ism world, we need to look at the layers at the top, and we need to look at the roots, and that people are caught, and we are caught in between those two paradigms, what's beneath and what is above.
Yep.
So I wanted to go back to you, Nikki, to see if you had anything that you wanted to add, and also I think Bob began to ask you a question in terms of how can an empath take care of themselves or take care of others.
So because racial trauma specifically, trauma in general, right? Any kind of complex trauma is difficult, but racial trauma, because it's such a layered situation, what I do is I actually use, I'm not sure if you heard of a book called Internalized Racism by Donna Bivens, but I like to say she simplifies it into breaking it down for us as to how we can address it. Because when you think of racial trauma, it literally hits on low self-esteem and self-hatred, but these are things everybody goes through, right? So if somebody was to ask us, okay, well then what makes this different than any other trauma? She breaks it down further to say, okay, well, here's how it affects us. Even if a person of color has a very high self-esteem, right? As you had mentioned, Marianella, coming from a situation where you did have everything okay. I can use myself as an example to say where I was raised, it was honestly a high class society. So I didn't have socioeconomic issues or struggles or anything. But even with all of that being said, right, there is still a view of being less than a certain part of society. So how she breaks that down is in 4 dimensions, which she says the first layer that needs to be addressed is the inward dimension, which is the inferiority that we have to others, right? And we need to tackle that and unpack that fully. We then need to unpack the interpersonal, which is how we maintain relationships in our life. And this is, you do these literally with anyone you meet. The third that I tackle is the institutional part of it, which is that BIPOC individuals don't have shared ownership in certain things or leadership roles in certain things. So there's a whole institutional level of it, right? And then there's the cultural piece, which is the fact that what society has fed us to be deemed as appropriate or normal is created by just one set of people. So now we've been deemed as an other. So that then adds another layer. So when you break it down into those 4 dimensions, it makes it a little easier to get together and say, hey, if we work on these 4 levels and unpack this, we can literally get ourselves to the point of saying, okay, how do we change all the things in these 4 categories one by one? That literally, I call it a ripple effect, right? When you throw a pebble in a water, it has a ripple effect. When you throw that pebble into these 4 dimensions, it has a ripple effect that then goes to the macro level, I'm sorry. So you address it on a micro level so that it literally has a ripple effect to the macro level. And it sounds simple when I say it that way. Of course it's not, it's much more complex than that, but that's the easiest way to categorize it and frame it for those people who just wanna have a deeper understanding of, okay, how do we address this? And then Bob, just to answer your question in terms of just the energy that I get from other people, I always say that I try my best to remind myself that I only give from my overflow. So a lot of people say, hey, you know, make sure you refill your cup so that you're able to pour into others. And I say, no, I refill my cup, but I continue filling it. And I only give from what's on the overflow. Because if I pour what's in my cup, then I'm left completely empty and I then have to refill. So if I give from my abundance and my overflow, I can make sure I can continue giving over and over and over. So that's the best way.
I'm getting some feedback. Can you hear me both here?
Yep.
Okay, so Nikki, that is interesting that you would say that, because I'm actually working on a video right at this moment where I'm actually talking about the old airline metaphor, put on your own oxygen mask first before assisting others. And so, especially for, you know, right now when people are grieving on multiple levels, maybe the loss of a close loved one or beloved pet, but also on a global existential level, the loss of your daily routine. You can't go to the gym, you can't go to church, but the liquor store was deemed to be an essential business. So okay, so here's the thing, Marianella, now that you told me that, that one of the primary focuses of this call is to speak to people that are therapists and counselors, et cetera. One of the things that I was thinking is it's helpful as a concept when talking to people and thinking about, okay, what could I say to this person that would help them increase the quality of their life and increase their chances of longevity and successfully deal with the hassles of daily living, whether it's a macro or micro. I say they're all macro. There is no micro aggression. It's all macro. Oh, you speak so well. Oh, really? Okay. So here's my practical tip. A practical tip is that just like marketers do, we have to speak the language that whoever we're talking to, that they understand and they get it. Like when you go to the casino, you keep pulling the hand on the slot machine. It's only when you get the 3 lemons or the 3 apples that the understanding goes down. So here's what I'm getting at. I'm going to use the concept of Maslow's needs hierarchy.
Bob, I'm sorry to interrupt. Something is happening with your microphone, and it's very choppy.
It's choppy?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is what I'm thinking I would like to do. I am trying to contain myself here by being very composed, but I'm actually really, really excited about this conversation, and I would love to have a part 2 with the 2 of you of this conversation, so we can have better.
Right, because I'm using my phone rather than a laptop. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
No, it's still choppy.
It's choppy.
Yeah. Oh,
it's really
okay.
difficult.
So obviously the signal is being interfered with, which is no surprise because I've had.
I agree that a part 2 might be helpful.
Yes, so definitely we are contracting right now for a part 2 in 2 weeks, because I have 2 other colleagues I'll be interviewing next week. But then the week after, the 2 of you had planted some very fertile seeds here that I want us to explore deeper and to allow to blossom into conversations that are directly helpful to the providers, but also that the audience in general can benefit from the wisdom that the 2 of you has distilled here.
So Marianella, I want to know, can you hear me clearly enough? I just
Now
want to get in
I can.
This last point. Okay, so we have thunderstorms.
You're breaking up once more.
You're breaking up again.
Once you start speaking for a period of time, it ends up breaking up.
Right.
What about now? What about now?
Same thing.
Can you hear me?
It's the same thing. So let's do this because we are on the top of the hour as well. Can I get your commitment 2 weeks from now?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
You just send out a date and that will be fine.
All right. So thank you so much. I really think that the points that the 2 of you brought here are important ones, and we need to delve deeper into them. So I don't want to shortchange the audience. That's why I want you back. So thank you so much for taking the time to stopping by and having this conversation with me. And I look forward to seeing the two of you in 2 weeks.
You're very welcome. And hopefully next time I can help and get into recommendations on how to tackle those 4 different dimensions, because I definitely have a lot.
Yes.
Right, and I think that's great. And Marianella, if you would just remind me, I want to start off with the Maslow's needs hierarchy, because the 5 levels, I believe that is the key to being able to communicate with people effectively, whether it's on the therapist side or the coaching side or on the client side, because what the research shows is that people on the different levels generally can't understand each other. So a person that's into self-actualization, that's talking about, you know, flying private and being in the limo, the person that's at the survival level can't understand what they're even talking about. So what I'm saying is that we have people in our communities that are on every single level. Nikki said she didn't come from a level of deprivation that say somebody else did, and who lived in a shelter. So the approach to talking to Nikki about what her self-worth issues and her feelings of self-deservingness are totally different, or at least slightly or different enough, or like I like to say, it's a distinction with a difference. So the way you would address a child or a teenager or an adult with Nikki's background as a person of color would be very different than someone that grew up and they lived in a homeless shelter and the teacher said to them, "Why don't you have your homework?"
Yes, definitely, which brings us to the matter of perspectives and understanding the perspectives. So yes, another layer here that we must examine next time. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Absolutely.